Hey, ultimate music teachers. Have you ever wanted to compose your own music? I think we've all had a little bit of that, right? Just go ahead and share with us because we got some really cool stuff coming your way today. So, have you ever wanted to compose your own music? And where do you even start? I think that's the scary thing. We just don't even know where to begin. So, share with me if you've ever explored learning the idea of how to write a classical style piece. Haha, you might just noodle around. But what if you want to compose a classical style piece? And you may be wondering, how can I do that? Well, I'm Glory St. Germain from Ultimate Music Theory, and my special guest today is none other than the talented Allysia Van Betuw. And she's about to share her simple process of writing a binary piece. And plus, because you guys are watching us either live or in the replay today, you're going to be getting an amazing free gift. It's a Playbook, an incredible gift from Allysia. And so stay tuned and we'll give you access to that at the end. I'm so excited. Welcome, Allysia.
Hi, Glory. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
I'm so excited you're joining us today. So Allysia is a piano teacher and she's the host of the YouTube channel and website PianoTV. Oh, she's a movie star. And also the host of the upcoming first ever piano convention. It's online and it's for adult students. So it's very cool. onlinepianocon.com. We're going to be telling you all about that in a little bit. Now, Allysia, how did you get started in creating your channel, PianoTV?
It was really just an idea that I had way back. I think it was like in 2015. I was like, you know what? It would be nice if I could teach people in groups and like instead of one-on-one to be able to teach people like all across the world of all different like ages and levels and stages and stuff like that. So it was just kind of like a basement idea, right? The idea you have like, maybe I'll give this a try and see what happens.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? Sometimes we just have to go with that. We just have to say, well, hey, how are we going to do that? Christopher says, hello. Well, perhaps we'll see if he's up to doing some composing. Now, so you're a musician. Do you, how did you get started? How old were you when you started your piano lessons?
Oh, really young. My parents both have their RCM grade 8. So I grew up with a piano in the home and they both played. So I would sit down at the piano as like a 4-year-old and just kind of clunk the keys. But instead of mashing keys like kids tend to do, I would like press them really slowly and sadly. And I called them like my sad songs. So then my mom signed me up for lessons.
Well, you were like a natural. You kind of, I guess, had that desire. And I think too, when you have two parents that are both musical, chances are you're going to follow in their footsteps, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And before you share the process of writing the binary dance piece, now, how did you do you remember when you first started writing your first piece? Like, how did that happen?
I don't remember like a first piece, but I actually have my old childhood diaries from when I was in like grade 4 and I had all kinds of lyrics and stuff written in them. I remember one that was called More Than a Million You, and it was about like a boy who I just thought was like super generic or something. It was like, hilarious little kid writing, but I do remember that one in particular.
Yeah. And it's so fun. I think sometimes we just have to release ourselves. I remember when I was writing the Ultimate Music Theory workbooks and, you talk about what inspires you to write a piece of music. Mm-hmm. So I had written this piece, and in this particular chapter, it was about minor. And I just finished writing the piece and I was trying to think, well, what would be a good title? And at that point I was writing, 10 hours a day. And my husband, opened the studio and he said to me, pizza's here. And I was just like, oh, and because he'd ordered pizza every single day because I was writing and not doing any cooking. So I named my piece, No More Pizza. So sometimes life inspires us, right, to get started. So how do we get started writing our very first classical style?
So when I introduced this course to my adult students online, I knew that I was working with people who had never written any music at all for the most part. Like I think 90% of participants had said like, yeah, no, I'd never done anything like this before. So I tried to think about how I could make it as foolproof as possible for people who had like maybe hadn't even been playing piano for that long. So the most important thing that you always want to start with when you're writing, and this can apply to pop music a little bit, but specifically with classical music, is you want to build around cadences. And cadences are kind of like your musical punctuation. If you're writing a story, you need commas and periods and stuff like that, or else it's just run-on sentences. With classical music, we need cadences at the end of usually every set of 4 bars, because that punctuation is going to give the whole piece structure and shape.
You know, I'm so glad that you said that, Allysia, because I think a lot of times we hear, and why I was so excited that we were doing the interview today, because oftentimes we hear people talking about improvisation and, lead sheets and things like that. But I think there is still a really interesting way of how do we just form like a classical piece. I mean, it's so important to learn all aspects of composition. And in a recent course that you created, songwriting workshop, I think you spent, what was it, about 6 weeks?
Yes.
Walking students through the process of writing a binary dance piece. I think you had minuets and sarabands, and so forth. And so if a student wants to compose their own classical dance, other than knowing how to do the dance, what's sort of the most important thing that they need to be able to do?
So aside from cadences, if I were to walk you through the process of composing, let's just pick like a 16-bar composition, because a lot of simple classical dance pieces are 16 bars, really short. So that's 4 lines of 4. And I like to think of everything in music as 4s. And this applies to pop music as well. A lot of music is built in sets of 4. So with our binary dance piece, let's call it a minuet just for simplicity's sake, they're nice and easy ones. We want to put a cadence at the end of each of the 4 lines. A cadence is just a chord pattern, basically. The easiest cadences that you can do are 5-1 or 1-5, which is to simplify things. So if you're in the key of C, then a 5-1 cadence, a perfect cadence, is going to be a G chord to a C chord. And perfect cadences give us that feeling of like, this is like finished. It's a complete thought. They're like our periods, like the sentences. Whereas imperfect cadences give us kind of like a question mark sound, because we're going from the 1 to the 5. We're going from a C chord to a G chord, which gives us that like that question mark sound.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the questions, songwriting workshop, Christopher is asking. Yes, absolutely. I invite our viewers, whether you're watching live today or whether you're watching the replay, it's really important to know what is your genre. Like if you want to write or compose a piece based on a minuet, and I'm sure that you covered this in your course as well, because if you're writing a binary piece of music in minuet or saraband, like it also talks about time signatures and the feel that particular kind of piece would bring into the music itself, correct?
Yeah, and that's actually something that we talk about in the very last lesson, is about different types of dance music. So that's where we talk about like minuets, sarabands, off the top of my head, like gavottes, just different dances and how they feel. So for example, since we're talking about minuets, they are in triple meter. So they're in 3/4, and they're generally like slow and simple, whereas a saraband is going to be like really slow, and the second beat's going to be long and emphasized. So yeah, whatever type of dance we're doing, it has its own unique characteristics.
Yeah, and that's fantastic, because I think that really is something that when you not only are learning how to compose these, but when you are learning how to play those pieces, you have a better understanding as, oh, this is a minuet, this is 3. So, it's based on tiny little steps. I remember when I was studying for my ARCT with the Royal Conservatory of Music and was researching all of these things. And now, of course, we've written about them. But one of the things that I came across was a book that was 1,200 pages of how to dance the minuet, because it was so complicated, and that whole time period and how they did it. And I think it's kind of fun to bring all of that back. And of course, I'm passionate about music theory, and I think that it's important to learn those concepts, so that now we can come and apply those concepts to composing, which is what you were just saying about, you have to understand what is a cadence and how is a cadence formed, and if it leaves you with a question or if it resolves to an answer. So if a student wants to compose their own classical dance piece, what's the most important thing that they need to be able to do?
Well, first of all, I want to say that I am also passionate about music theory, like you. And this is part of the reason I decided to teach the course, is because I wanted to give people a way to apply the music theory they were learning. So writing music is one of the best ways that you can actually learn music theory, because you have to apply it. So a really important thing to keep in mind. So you have to understand cadences to give your piece structure. Another thing that you need to be able to understand is how to write an effective melody. And you could do endless courses on melody writing, because it's just such a huge topic. But just a few tips to get started if you've never written a melody before. One of the first things to think about is melodies tend to be stepwise, because oftentimes they're imitating the human voice. And if you think about singing, if you try to sing something and there's like leaps all over the place, and you're like going from a G to a D to an A to, like, it doesn't feel natural to sing. And oftentimes our melodies follow the human voice and sound best when they follow the shape of the human voice. So mainly move your melody in steps with like the odd leap thrown in there. And if you're leaping around, you can balance that with a few steps. So maybe you're going from C, D, E, G, E, D, C. So you have like a little skip in there, but you balance it with some more steps. And that ends up giving you a really natural flowing sound.
Yeah, I think too that, and those are great tips, because I find too that once you have that motive, you can then, create a sequence, or you can kind of build on it. And I think maybe even if, when you talk about writing a melody, you want to make sure that you're staying within sort of a vocal range too, because you're right, you don't go sort of from, middle C up, 3 octaves like that. That doesn't really make sense, nor can the hand play it. Right. So we're kind of thinking about two things. You write it, but then how easy is it to play that? Do you have them write the melody first and then add the chord structure, or how does that work?
I do that the other way, actually. So we start with the chord. Yeah. So we start with the chord structure, because I find that melodies, if you just kind of come up with them, and it's okay to come up with melodies out of thin air, that's fine. But as a starting point, if you've never written before, it's good to give yourself creative limitations. Otherwise, I find like we just get lost in the sea of options. So if you pick a little chord pattern, so you have your cadences, and then maybe you pick a couple other chords to work with, and you play those in your left hand. From there, you can go and write a melody over top of that. I just find it so much easier to fit a melody to chords than to fit chords to a melody.
Yeah, and it's so interesting, because I think as as a songwriter or composer, especially when you're doing something like the minuet, because we're not talking about, oh, I'm going to write a song. We're talking about composing a specific style of music. In what you're doing is with the classical. So I really like that idea a lot, and I think it also enables you to just think a little bit when you hear that the chords that you're putting in your left hand, where can my melody go? So I love that. One of the things, we've got some comments here, I guess I better address ours. I think Tatis here, let me move this so I can see, says, Piano TV rocks, my favorite channel. Yay.
That's so kind. Thank you.
Yeah. So there's your fan, your super fan. Christopher says, I learned more about composing from the first theory class than two semesters of composing. Yeah, sometimes you're right. You can take a course like this and it's just there. Chord structure first. I can't see, my little thing is in the way. Christopher says, chord structure first. Is that also beneficial because of the creative limits that it puts in by the cadences? So that's a great question, Christopher. So he was just asking, Allysia, that when you're doing your chords first, it would probably give you more opportunities to go, oh, that doesn't fit, right, with the melody.
Yeah, it's exactly what he said. It's the creative limitations. A lot of times, it seems like if we give ourselves these limitations, it's going to restrict creativity. But I actually find that the exact opposite is true. This is going to be a really weird comparison, but what just popped into my head is, I can't remember what cooking show it is, but those cooking shows where like they give you 4 weird ingredients and you have to like somehow, it's like, is that Chopped? I can't remember what it's called. But it's kind of like that, where if you give these genius chefs these 4 ingredients, they come up with like amazing things that they might not have come up with otherwise, like without those limitations. And I think the same is true of music. Even if you limit yourself to like, I'm going to write a piece of music in the key of F, or I'm going to write like a D minor, like giving yourself specific, or I'm going to write a minuet. That's a really specific, limited focus. But
Right.
from there, I feel like you're really able to flourish and expand.
Yeah, that is so true. And I love your analogy of the chef in the kitchen because it's really true. I think sometimes if you just even say to a student, "Oh, go ahead and compose, a minuet." Well, where do I even start? And I love how you've mapped it out really simply. Start with your, 4 measure phrases, end with the cadence, then add your chord structure. So you're going to start on the one, just kind of map it through, and then get started with your melodic line. So could you walk us through the process of just writing a simple binary piece like the minuet, just from start to finish? How would we go about getting started with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we map out our cadences like we talked about. So the easiest way to get started with this is to do what I call, well, it's not my own unique thing, but it's question and answer writing. So
Okay.
the first line is a question, which is going to be our imperfect cadence, because that's what gives us that question sound. And then the second line is going to be an answer, kind of like call and response, I guess. And then we're going to do the same thing with line 3 and 4, question, answer. Now,
Okay.
one thing that I'm not going to talk about, because is something for the course, it's a little beyond the scope of what we can talk about today, is most classical music is going to modulate, which means change keys about halfway through, which is really, really fun. It's really fun to learn how to do that. But we're just going to not modulate today. We're going to keep things more straightforward. So when you're writing question answer form, your first line is going to have an imperfect cadence, and then your second line is going to have a perfect cadence. If you want to cheat, it's not really cheating, because a lot of music does this. But question answer writing, usually the answer is almost identical to the question. And what I mean by that is that the melody and the chords are going to be like almost entirely the same in the first and second line, with just the little difference at the end. You're going to need to tweak the melody a little bit to match the different cadence at the end of the second line. And then we can do the same thing in line 3 and 4. So with binary writing, what binary means is two-part. You can think like computers, it's like in binary code, zeros and ones, right? So it's two-part form, bi is 2. And the first 2 lines are going to be the first part, and then the next 2 lines are going to be the second part. So you can think of that as like our A section, our first part is idea number 1, and then our B section is idea number 2. Now, with idea number 1, you have a question and answer, and it's like the material is pretty much the same. And then in the B section, you can change up the material, make it a little bit different, but then again, keep line 4 pretty similar to line 3. Is that making sense so far?
Yes. Yes, because I think when you map it out that way too, you kind of have that the natural form of even having a conversation. If we think about a topic, so if you're writing a melodic line and this is your topic, you're going to have some variation in the next one, but bringing it to a conclusion. And I think I guess the other thing too is when we talk about the melodic line. So if you're ending, you're going to have a stable scale degree, so you would end on the tonic with your melody. But if you're ending in your 5, if you're asking a question going to a 1-5 cadence, you're going to end on an unstable scale degree, right? So like a 2 or a 7, so that it kind of leaves that question. Just as you and I are having a conversation, we're kind of having a minuet of a dance here. I ask a question, and then you're giving me a response, and then we have another question. So it's kind of fun to go through the process of really mapping it out step by step. And how long does it take for students to go through the course?
Well, it's a 6-week course, but obviously you can do it in whatever timeline that you want. So in the six weeks, we have 1 weekly lesson, which is like usually 30 to 45 minutes. And then there's also a weekly Q&A session that I had live when it originally aired. And in that live session, I shared people's, with their consent, I shared their writings and discussed it on the air. So even though it's not live anymore, I still find it's really useful, because
Yes.
if you're going through the course and writing, you can kind of refer to everyone else's, and people who submitted their recordings and their music. It's not like they were, some people were, maybe a little bit more intermediate or advanced level piano players, but most people doing it were like pretty much beginner level. So it's not like, it's not intimidating. I find that sharing everyone's music made it really accessible.
Yes. And I think we really, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because we really do learn from observing other people. And sometimes that gives us an idea too. You might have heard, someone composed their piece and they added a little mordant or,
Mm.
little trill somewhere and you're going, oh, I like that. I'm going to put that in my minuet. So I think when we share ideas, we really learn more so than just trying to do it all by ourselves.
Yeah, it was like, I think that was way more useful than the lesson itself. I think just being able to see what everyone else is writing and then talk about that.
Yeah.
And I like what you said as well about when you were talking about question answer writing, like the scale degrees, like 2 and 7 for the, I just wanted to say too, this is just another thing on melody writing. I just want to throw a tip out to you guys.
Yeah.
When a piece of music ends, like a dance piece, it's always going to end with the scale degrees 2 to 1. So maybe that would be D to C, or 7 to 1. Maybe that's going to be B to C. If you flip through your music books and you like looking at a minuet or a courant or anything like that, you'll see that it like reliably ends with 2 to 1 or 7 to 1. And that's just because that gives us a really, really strong, that's like the end of a paragraph. That's like the end of a chapter in a book. It gives us a really strong finished sound. So, little tip there.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really challenging our viewers today to share with us if you have ever tried to compose a classical piece. Marilyn Hooper just joined us, and she said, "Oh, wait." I have to move my little thing over here. Sorry, family. So let me go back here. Marilyn Hooper says, oh, I missed the beginning of the discussion. Can these ideas be applied to melody writing question on a theory exam? And the answer is absolutely, Marilyn. Exactly what Allysia is saying in the cadence forms and ending, with an imperfect cadence in the first 4 measures, and then concluding with a cadence, a perfect cadence at the end. Those are actually melody writing that you do on a music theory exam. So you're kind of getting the the best of both worlds here. You're taking an online course to learn how to write classical pieces, but you can also apply that. And I think the great benefit too, Allysia, is that when you're doing something like that, one of the things you have to learn how to do is almost hear in your head what you're writing. I always say, can you hear what you see, and can you see what you hear? So when you're writing, you may challenge yourself to write the notation, but can you hear that in your head, or do you have to go to your piano to play it? When you're first starting to compose, do you compose at the piano or do you compose away from the piano? How do you start?
That's an interesting question. If I'm writing this kind of piece of music, almost always I'm at the piano. Now I have a pretty good ear, so I can I can visualize everything, or I guess whatever the auditory equivalent to visualization is. But I just find it's more organic, I suppose, to just sit down at the piano and mess around until you find like a suitable melody. And so I just think it's easier to write music sitting at the piano.
Yeah, I think it is too. One of the things too, I remember we've been talking about the cooking show that you love. One of the things that I remember, my mother was an incredible cook and baker, and I don't know if she'd call herself a chef, but she was very talented in the kitchen. Thank goodness, because I was always at the piano playing. And she said, well, as long as you play, I'll cook. Great deal. So one day I was out with my mom, and she opened up a cookbook that she was thinking of buying. And she said, oh, this is delicious. I'm going to make this for dinner. And I kind of looked at her and said, what are you talking about? What do you mean is, a pound of this and a cup of that? And I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. But she said, it's the same, Allysia, is if you open up a piano book and you look at the music and you go, oh, I can't wait to play this. And my mom said, you do that all the time, Glory. How do you do that? And I said, well, I can hear it. I look at it and I can hear it. And she said, well, the same goes for cooking. If I read the recipe, I can taste it. And I went, oh, well, that's pretty cool. I think we have a lot of fun with that. One of the other things, Christopher says, it sounds like a great online masterclass. Absolutely. Absolutely. So he also said, can I work at the piano or should I work away from the piano? You kind of answered that question, but do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, I like doing the active part of composing at the piano, but that's not to say that like some of the theory concepts, obviously you can do, not at the piano. It's really just your preference though, because I find that everyone's different in this regard. Some people really like just like sitting down with pen and paper before going to the piano, and some people don't. So it really just depends how you work best. Experiment.
Yes. And I think too, the other thing that's interesting is, so now we're writing the music. Are you doing everything like by hand? You have like staff paper and you're writing it out by hand, or do you suggest, using, a computer program such as Finale, or how do you suggest your students do, write their composition?
Well, what I usually do is start with pencil and paper because I'm old school, and it's just the fastest and easiest way for me to get down my ideas. But then what I'll do, and what my students in the course did, is put it into MuseScore, is what most of us used. It's free. Finale is great too. I believe Finale's paid. I've never used it myself. But I think it's a lot more robust. But if you're getting started, you can experiment with MuseScore. It's an open source program. I find it pretty intuitive to use. So that's a way too. And one thing that participants found, especially those who were more at a beginner level, is they weren't necessarily able to play their ideas right away. So what the program allowed them to do was input the notes and program their own ideas and listen to it, because you can hit the play button and it'll show you what you're composing without physically being able, like if you're not at that level yet. So that's kind of cool too.
Yeah, that's a great tip, actually. I'm not familiar because obviously I use Finale for writing our theory books, but that's a great tip. So it's just Muse, and it's a free
MuseScore, yeah.
MuseScore, and then you can use that to do to compose and listen back. That's a great tip. My family, I have 5 kids, and my husband, they're all professional musicians, entertainers, singers, songwriters, and they all do, even though they're my daughter Sherry is the youngest. She's actually a music producer in Vegas, but to this day, when she's writing, she still does what you said, pencil paper, because you sit at the piano and it's just faster, and scribble it out, and it's just kind of I don't know, it just comes from within, doesn't it? I think it's a faster way to write.
Yeah, you scribble it out and then you can translate your scribbles later.
Exactly. So why did you decide to teach a course on writing classical style music?
Well, again, it was kind of just a way to, I wanted to teach music theory because I'm really passionate about it. I've done pretty good. Like I've done all of my RCM theory exams have been a blast to study for and stuff. So I wanted to teach this to people, but again, like having it be more practical. But it was also a totally selfish decision. I wanted to do something that I thought was really fun. And I thought it would be really fun to, learn a little bit more about binary compositions and teach it. I was like, if we were to talk about classical compositions, what would be the very first starting point? So if I then went on to teach more classical related composing classes, we could kind of build on it. So I was totally selfish. I just wanted to do a course that I thought would be fun. And I was like, well, if one person does it, great. If 100 people do it, great. I'm happy.
Yeah. Well, I think you've really provided a fantastic tool because, for some of us, we're wondering, well, what if we don't know how to improvise and that's not our thing? What if we do just want to write our own, but we want that structure and we want to sort of have a certain format that's easy to use, and we have the support and we can learn the steps from you. So I think it's a fantastic opportunity. What are some of the next projects? Because I know what's coming up, and I'm excited for you to share. What are the fun projects on the horizon that's coming up?
Yeah, well, actually starting today, so this is very good timing, Glory, is we are starting the early bird registration for an online piano convention. And this is the internet, as far as I know, this is the internet's first online convention for piano students. This is especially geared to people who are maybe like in that beginner and intermediate phase. So what I've done is I gathered together 23 people, including myself and including Glory, the wonderful Glory, to speak on topics of their own like expertise. So we have 23 different sessions. Lots of people you've probably heard of. I'm really honored to have been able to meet with so many wonderful people. So people like Glory, people like Amy Nolte, Nari Soul, Johnny May, Bill Hilton, like a lot of the like really I would say like the classic YouTubers and bloggers and stuff like that. So we have really good conversations. My goal with the convention was to make sure that every session gave people specific things to try. So it's a really actionable convention. And yeah, like I said, early bird registration opens now, like it begins today, and it's free. I should mention that as well. The free convention runs from June 26th to 30th. So you can sign up and register now, and then we'll email you when everything goes live and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So it's onlinepianocon.com. And I'm going to just pop that up on the screen. So because we also want to share a little, oops, how can I X out of here? Okay. There we go. I also want to share, I'm just going to pop that up on the agenda here so that they can see it. So this is where you can go. Sorry. There we go. Do you want to tell?
It was there and then it was gone.
Oh, there you go. Okay, so can you share with us what this link is for? Because we did mention there was a present, so thank you for the present already in advance. So you're going to the onlinepianocon.com. That's where you're going to register, and then we get a present.
Yeah. So if you go to onlinepianocon.com/ and then you type in Playbook, that's going to be your free ebook. Now, what this ebook is it's 23 strategies for practicing piano. And each one of these strategies were something that I pulled from my conversations with I guess 22 people. One of them is myself. I didn't really have a conversation with myself, but 23 strategies for 23 different speakers. It's, and again, I wanted it to be highly actionable. So it's just like my one main takeaway from every session that you then have like in an ebook. So if you're wanting to just like have a little bit more fun at the piano, try new things, improve your skills, there's everything from like sight reading ideas to chord ideas to improv and jazz ideas, working with lead sheets, stuff on like practicing piano more effectively, just all kinds of stuff like that.
Yeah. And I think what's fantastic too about it, Allysia, is that this course and this online conference that you put together for us it's really for adult learners. But even if you're a teacher, I would highly recommend attending, because you always learn something. I don't think a day goes by that I don't learn something. And I'm coachable. I'm an open book. I like to teach, but I also love to learn. And I'm super excited to be a part of this. So thank you for inviting me to that. And I'm also super excited to hear all of the speakers that you've got lined up. It's incredible. So when we can get registered, and when does it go live again, if you can just remind us?
Yep. Yeah. So it goes live June 26th, which is a Wednesday, and it's a 5-day convention. So basically there's about 4 people per day. There's a little bit more on Saturday and Sunday. Right. And you have 48 hours to check out the sessions when they go live. So it's a little better than like a real life in-person convention, because it's not limited to like, the hour that people are on stage. Yeah. You get a little bit of extra time.
Yeah. Oh, it's perfect. Well, thank you so much for putting this together. Make sure that you get registered now. It's onlinepiano.com.
Onlinepianocon.com. Yeah.
Onlinepianocon, as in conference. Yeah. Onlinepianocon.com, and then /Playbook, and you can go ahead and grab that too. So thank you so much. I know everyone's going to really enjoy that. And we do have a little challenge, of course. If you want to do some composing, maybe you could go ahead and share your minuet with us here after you go through Allysia's course, and we'll see how it goes. We'll have some fun listening to that. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'm excited for the conference, and we will see everyone soon. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Gloria. Bye, guys.